Щасливо Нового року. Happy New Year. Welcome to Ukrainian Connections. I'm your host, Kathy Peroshi-Harris, Katrusha Parashchi-Harris. I welcome you to hear about Ukrainian Connections that happen in Thunder Bay, Northwestern Ontario, and Canada, where we'll share different things about our history, about the arts, culture, and our own stories. We hope you enjoy the show today. We are in January 2024, and we're going to talk about the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the Ukrainian Youth Association, both Thunder Bay branches. And we use the acronym LUC and SUM for those. And with that, we have many of the artifacts in behind me and many pictures that we have found in the location of the LUC and SUM Hall. So we hope to share many of those with many stories as we go through today's show. I'd like to welcome our special guest today, Sasha Piskun. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Sasha. It's a short version of Alexander. I live in Thunder Bay, and I was born and grew up in Ternopil, Ukraine.
Thank you, thank you. So as we start talking about these two organizations, if time permits, we will fill in some things about some of the other amazing organizations that are in Thunder Bay, both establishments and organizations that existed before and continue to exist today. So Sasha, what is your involvement with the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the SUM out of the Thunder Bay branch?
I'm now on the executive board of LUC, the local branch in Thunder Bay.
Okay.
My position is member at large.
Okay, okay. So being fairly new to the organization,
Yes.
you were volunteered to be interviewed today as a really good opportunity for you to learn more about the organization. So you've had to study and you've had to interview some people. And so today might be a little bit new for you too in trying to share some of this information.
Yes, that's correct. I had to go through a lot of artifacts and different stories, so that's why I came prepared.
That's good. So if you look at your notes, that's totally fine today. Yes. So what is the League of Ukrainian Canadians?
So the League of Ukrainian Canadians was established in Canada in 1949, and first it was a League of Liberation of the Ukraine. The main focus was the independence of Ukraine, and its mission was to fight communism by doing everything they could on political, cultural, and all other levels. So this organization was found after the Second World War. After the Second World War, a lot of Ukrainian men, soldiers, ended up scattered throughout Europe. When the war ended, for different reasons, people didn't want to go back to Soviet-controlled Ukraine. So a lot of them decided to stay in the countries they were or immigrate to the West. Canada was struggling for laborers, so companies would hire all these men to come to work to Canada in the woods and different other fields. When many of these new immigrants came to Canada, they have started many groups, organizations, just to support their Ukrainian community and preserve their culture. It's not the first wave of Ukrainians, as you may know, that arrived to Canada. There were organizations created during previous immigration, such as Prosvita Society, churches, and lots of activities were organized by these groups.
Yes. Yes, that's true. And Thunder Bay has had a plethora of Ukrainian immigrants come here and live. So these organizations have been very important for them to as you said, to maintain their identity and their cultural connection. So with that, if you can kind of tell me a little bit about some of the things that both the League of Ukrainian Canadians and SUM may have done.
Yeah, so after the Second World War, immigrants continued to fight for the Ukraine from Canada and other countries that they were. That is where the SUM came into place. In 1950s, the Ukrainian Youth Association, with the acronym SUM, was also formed as a cultural and social and political organization. The League of Liberation changed its name to the League of Ukrainian Canadians in 1991 when the Ukraine was liberated from Soviet Union. So it took several years for them to be active, and they did a lot of different political and other cultural stuff. These organizations had many priorities, such as providing a social, cultural, educational network, and having a political voice. So they ran many activities and events out of Toronto. They circulated a newsletter called Homing. I believe we have it here.
Here's a copy of a Homing that still exists now. This one was from 2021, so it's still an active newsletter.
Yeah, it means Voice of Ukraine, and it is active, like Kathy said. Currently, the League of Ukrainian Canadians has around 9 branches all over Canada, including the Thunder Bay branch. After the 1991, the direction of these organizations obviously changed because Ukraine became independent. And in its place of fighting the democracy for freedom for Ukraine, they then prioritized improving the Ukraine's economy, improving Ukraine-Canadian relations, gathering donations to help and develop the improvement of hospitals, orphanages, schools, and providing scholarship for children and students. For Ukrainian Canadians, they also continued with the mission of providing social, cultural, educational network here in Canada. The first Ukrainian nation, I'll start over. The first Ukrainian national home of Thunder Bay branch that housed the League of Liberation, then the League of Ukrainian Canadians, and SUM. It was first housed in Fort William at 619 Pacific Avenue at East End. In 1960, they have moved to Robertson Street, which is where they still are today.
So I understand that when they bought the hall on Robertson Street, that was, I think, in 1962, but it didn't have a basement. And so yesterday when I was at the hall, one of the other executive members happened to find the blueprints of the addition on the hall where they lifted the hall and they put a basement underneath.
That's correct, yeah.
Which I think is pretty cool because it shows what they had originally planned, and not all of it came through in their dreams because they had a few wishes of walk-in freezers and walk-in refrigerators because they were planning to make, pirahen and holubtsi and have feasts all the time. And back in the early days, they did have a lot of feasts, and I know you're going to talk about that, but I just thought this was kind of a neat archival thing to have.
Yeah, it is cool.
Yes. So on that note, stay tuned. We're going to be right back with some more Ukrainian Connections. Welcome back to Ukrainian Connections, where today we're talking about the Ukrainian Youth Association and the League of Ukrainian Canadians, the Thunder Bay branches. And our guest, we have Sasha with us today. So continuing on our conversation, what are some of the activities that happened under the SUM, Thunder Bay branch?
Under the Ukrainian Youth Association, SUM, there were many local cultural activities that occurred. One of them were a mandolin orchestra was started under the direction of Bogdan Statiev. The group was named Veselka and performed locally and was even able to travel to Minneapolis and Winnipeg to perform. When interviewing Hanya Tvornek about the orchestra, she told us that she played the mandolin. She also told us that she would collect 10 cents from every member every week to put towards the activities. Hanya was the only one that had an electrical mandolin after her original mandolin was broken by one of her siblings. Luckily, she still had this instrument and is now being played by Dr. Haggerty from T-Bay Trad and Irish folk group in Thunder Bay. We have it here, I believe, right?
I have it right here, but I'm going to spare you today, and I'm not going to play it. Maybe we'll jam after and have a little bit of mandolin playing.
We'll try. There was also a choir that was led by Anna Statiev and by Pan Holovets. Holovets used to own Bay Meats. The choir did not have a name, unfortunately, or we don't have any records of it.
We have lots of pictures of them,
yes.
and we'll show some of the pictures in today's cast, yeah.
There was also a dance group that ran out of that organization with several instructors. One of them was Pan Stefan Pisotsky. When we spoke to some of the old-time members, many fondly remember the Marina dance he taught.
Okay, so there is a picture of Stefan Pisotsky, and he has some of the dancers around him. So when I first came to Thunder Bay in the 1980s, Stefan Pisotsky was still very active with the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the Ukrainian Youth Association. And when he was active there, I can remember him showing me some of the choreography moves for the Marena dance. And he was really wanting and very excited for us to possibly introduce the dance again. And maybe we will someday. For those of you who don't know the song, it goes something like this. La da 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 da. And if you know the words, you can join in. Yes, that's the Marena. So Mr. Pisotsky, he ran a Ukrainian bookstore in Thunder Bay, and he was one of many Ukrainian businessmen that set up shop when they moved to Thunder Bay, maybe after they came out of working for the forestry industry or on the trains. And he had a store called Arca Bookstore. And that's where you could sell books, but you could also ship parcels to Ukraine. He provided translation services. He also sold a lot of Ukrainian handicrafts. I have actually right behind me, there's a beautiful wooden box that I bought at his store years ago. He sold supplies for making Ukrainian Easter eggs, the pisanke, or for embroidery. Much of the embroidery here, the pieces of thread and embroidery thread came from his store. Greeting cards, you could pay your bills there. He would also boil you an egg and make you a cup of tea if you had some time to sit. So he was quite the character. And then when we're talking about dancing, I remember also Mr. Theodore Romaniuk, when he was still living and coming to the hall often as well. He was another dance instructor that helped the group years ago. And he told me that he learned from a workshop led by Vasil Avraменko. And he's a very famous Ukrainian who came to North America and South America. And he traveled across basically the Americas with the goal of setting up Ukrainian dance groups in every town. And he did stop in the Lakehead, it was called, and gave a workshop there. So it's pretty cool to talk to people who learned from him. There was also a women's league that I've just recently learned about as well. And for many years, while all the other activities were going on, in the background, it was a lot of the women that were setting things up. They were organizing banquets, malankas, Easter meals. And I know Mrs. Anna Hook was one of the very avid organizers, often with many of other buddies as well. So from some of our interviews that you had, what are some of the other activities that were happening in these organizations?
Like you said, the women were organizing a lot on background, so the costumes were made by them. Mrs. Hannah Hook recently passed, and many of the costumes she made are still in use now by Chaban Ukrainian Dance Group. Here is a samples from the 1950s and 60s. Right behind me.
Yeah, this black skirt with the little embroidery around it was made in the 50s and 60s, and it's still being danced with today, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Many are well over 60 years old. So, and Chaban continues to use an original St. Nicholas costume. It's right behind Kathy. Yeah.
And the original crown too, which is up on the shelf there, which I think is pretty cool. Yeah.
It is. Props for these groups were made by women and members of the league. The dancers from these original groups evolved into an independent group first called Veselka. Then in the 1990s, they renamed themselves to Chaban. They continue to use many items from these original groups, like we said, and Mrs. Hook and many others taught pisanke making. Many of her students continue to teach in town and across the country, especially her granddaughter Mia. Mrs. Hook taught others how to embroider. She also taught the spring hayivke, Eastern dance. Luka organization also had a competitive chess club. We had a picture.
Yeah, we'll show you the picture of that. That's pretty cool.
And in the 1960s and 70s, they ran a youth camp at Karpate, where 2 weeks in the summer, kids were dropped off with a bunch of parents. The kids did different kind of activities, singing, dancing, orientating, hiking, swimming, all sorts of crafts. They also had the regular spring, summer, and fall celebrations and picnics at Dubrova property off of Twin City Crossroads. But since then, it's been sold. There are so many activities happening in the 1980s, such as bingos, teas, bake sales, caroling, picnics, bazaars, lotteries, selling of pierogies and cabbage rolls, which we still currently do. When we interviewed a few of the past Look members, they told us the story of Mr. Ivan Korda. He was noted as a great historian, political activist, and Ukrainian journalist. So as a young boy, he recounted stories of surviving in Siberia, eating soup of worms. That's all they fed them back then. And he spoke of the wolves and bears that surrounded their camps. This actually reminded me of this, our family story.
We'll be back in a moment to share Sasha's story. Welcome back to Ukrainian Connections. Sasha, if you're okay, would you mind telling us the story that about your parents, your ancestors?
Yeah, sure. So my great-grandfather, Pradido, Andriy Bughaysky, was also a soldier during the Second World War. After the war, he ended up somewhere in Europe, and due to the situation in Ukraine, obviously, he didn't want to go back. He wanted to go back, but he couldn't, so he decided to go to Canada. So once in Canada, he caught a train and out of the Montreal to Thunder Bay. After the 1945, he was in Canada with a plan on bringing his family here. But during the war, he lost complete contact with his wife, Oля, and her daughters. So for 10 years, he's been trying to pull all the resources, all the time and everything to find and reconnect with them, right? It appeared that, as lots of other families, his wife and daughters were sent to Siberia. That was part of the Russian mind games, that they were taking families and then bringing them to Siberia and bringing all the other families and planting them in their houses, and then they were taking over. So that was the Russism, right? So they tried to promote Russian language and culture. That's how they planned on doing, just take people out. So after he found them, so he tried to spend all the resources he was able to pull to help him to come back home. So since they arrived home, they had a good contact with him all the time. They were writing letters and remaining with contact with my Pradido, but he still wanted to bring them here. It was all along his plan, right? So later on, my babcia Slava and her sister and my great babcia Oля would visit him, and then later, I'm not sure the years, but Oля stayed here, and my babcia Slava and Irina, they went back. So they had families, and so they were staying back for quite some time. And in 1990s, that's when my babcia Slava and Dido Slavko, they moved completely to Thunder Bay. After that, there was a second kind of wave of our family. My aunt Oksana and her family came over, and then my family were supposed to come, my mom as their second daughter, but they applied many times, over 5 times she was refused visa. So that was kind of the story, a little bit of that, and so that's why I was born in Ukraine and visited Canada several times. I was coming here as a kid for summertime always to visit Grandma and Dido, and now I live here for over 9 years. I came here in 2015 for college and decided to stay. I'm I have a well-established life here in Thunder Bay with my beautiful wife, Diana, who's also from Ukraine, but our story started kind of online. We have beautiful daughter that she's 2.5 years old. We only speak Ukrainian to her, and then, but obviously she catches English super fast, all the TV and everything else. We really hope to pass all the culture and the knowledge and histories of Ukraine to her, so she can pass the torch. So it's kind of passing the torch, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that beautiful story of the hardships and the joy at the same time. Mm-hmm. I know your Baba Slava, and I also knew your great grandmother, your prababa, Olya. I visited her a few times, and she used to sing, and she'd sing me some old tunes. And Slava had made several costumes for me for dancing. So very, very talented family that you come from. And your great grandmother, I know, celebrated her 100th birthday, and she passed away after she was 102. Which is really amazing for somebody who had such a hard life living in Siberia and the struggles of coming to another country. She was one tough person.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Many of us don't know the details and the hardships, both that our families have experienced or are experiencing now. And their stories really obviously choke me up, but they also really humble me and make me appreciate the hardships and how people work so hard to fight for what is right and to fight for freedom. And I think that it for me, it helps me appreciate the importance of hope and faith, and the strength that come with life and with living. So thank you, Sasha.
No problem.
Sasha, thank you so much for sharing that story. So back to talking about the League of Ukrainian Canadians. Now we have the Thunder Bay branch for that still. Why are these organizations so important to Ukrainian immigrants and their families?
Preserving Ukrainian identity, cultures, traditions, and remembering the history of Ukraine has been of continuous importance since the first immigrants came from Ukraine to Canada in the late 1800s. With immigrations came a lot of discrimination from previous settlers or settlers from other countries. Many Ukrainians found themselves changing or simplifying their last names or even their first names. It was often frowned upon when they spoke Ukrainian in public. Assimilation is difficult, even of new immigrants to Canada. These organizations are great support, even as a place to meet. Now with the Russian continues unprovoked war on Ukraine.
The organizations that exist to support Ukrainians while they're here, the newcomers, is very important for them for the reasons that you mentioned. Some of the activities that I know that have happened here in Thunder Bay since the start of the war is there was a big presentation in front of City Hall at the beginning of the war, raising community awareness and bringing the community together to support Ukraine and to show them that we support Ukraine. And also there was an event at the Friendship Gardens, Prayer for Ukraine, organized by a local church. And the League of Ukrainian Canadians has been very busy donating items for local newcomers. I know Walter Vodovoda was one of the leaders at the very beginning of the war, trying to help to make sure people had what they needed, distributing donations generously made by stores like Mark's. There was also yard sales and distributing money that was donated to newcomers, acting as a liaison, fundraising, also sending money to Ukraine for humanitarian aid. So there's been a lot of work done by many community members. A few other ones that spring to mind are Deborah Leschuk and Petra Kapush, Valeria and Diana, for helping in a variety of things: translations, hosting families, transporting, translating, teaching, driving lessons. God bless all of you who are trying to teach these newcomers how to drive in Canada. It's a little bit a little bit of fun, I can imagine. So this is all helping the great work of Thunder Bay Multicultural Association, and I know that we're pretty thrilled to have a lot of very wonderful people here from Ukraine that have now joined as part of our family. Culturally today, the League of Ukrainian Canadians is supporting groups like the Chaban Ukrainian Dance Group, the Judovli Ukrainian Folk Ensemble. They're still fundraising, making pierogi or vareniki. This is a really funky tool that I found at the hall. And this is to cut your rings of pierogi. It has a hole in it so that it doesn't make a suction onto the dough, and that it has this really cute knit or crochet cover so you don't hurt your hand when you cut the dough. So start saving your little soup cans for funky little pierogi cutters. I thought that was cute. I'm not too sure how many of these they will still use today, but they have different gadgets and tools, but that was definitely around in the 50s and 60s. So there's many benefits to having these organizations, and I think now with this new wave, there's a renewed purpose and a renewed energy, and having young blood such as yourself and other people that are both from Ukraine or young that have new vision for the League of Ukrainian Canadians and the Thunder Bay branch is excellent. Because we do want to maintain the community that we inherited from our parents and the previous Ukrainian immigrants. And we want to still provide a welcoming environment for people that have come from Ukraine, to our newcomers. And since 2022, Canada has seen the largest wave of new immigrants from Ukraine to this country. So many people have chosen this place as their home in Thunder Bay. Not that many people, but and our League of Ukrainian Canadians is welcoming all of them. And if you're interested in being a member of that league, you can follow us on Facebook. It's called League of Ukrainian Canadians - Thunder Bay. And if you're not on Facebook, you can message me on this page here, and I can send you the email contacts. So I'd like to thank the League of Ukrainian Canadian members who helped Sasha learn all this information about the past history and the more recent. Hanya Svornik, Walter Vodovoda, who are both first-generation Canadians and of parents born in Ukraine, and they've held pretty much all the executive positions on the SUM and Luke executives over the years. And also Halya Hook and her family, where the embroidery has come from, where her mother has taught so many people in the community many of the crafts of Ukraine. Also Kyle Gilhuli on the Luke New executive, now married to a Ukrainian. And he's provided a lot of the cool things that we have here today. I forgot to talk about this amazing typewriter with a Ukrainian keyboard. I would like to thank many in our Ukrainian community for supporting each other and helping to welcome all of our newcomers. And a big thank you to our special guest today, Sasha Piskun. Thank you for taking this opportunity to come and be live on TV.
Thank you.
And I'd like to thank my cousin Irena and Daniela for helping me set up today's exhibit. And we do have a Pisanka workshop that is being run as a fundraiser for the League of Ukrainian Canadians Thunder Bay branch, jointly with the Chaban Ukrainian Dance Group. And that will be on Saturday, March 9th. There's a morning session and an afternoon session. And the poster will be here as well with the information on how to register for that. So thank you very much for joining us today on Ukrainian Connections.
Бандуристе, орле сизий, добре тобі, брате. Маєш крила, маєш силу, є коли літати. Тепер лети в Україну, тебе виглядають. Полетів би за тобою, та хто привітає?